residents. And so Terry, if you could just tell us a bit about what the Poor People's Campaign has been doing and what you're doing within that, that would be wonderful. And I'm gonna time you guys just to give you some heads up on time, okay? You've got about.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, my name's Terry, and sitting at the Advocates in Residence here as a project of Poor People's Campaign. I've known Poor People's Campaign since camp here of last summer, where I was actually a camp participant, helping to organize on the ground with the people that I was familiarizing myself with and camping outdoors to really to encourage the sense of community. There was a lot of already community organizing. I saw the rich extended relationships of the first Alaskans here, and that was something I've not seen before for houseless organizing. And then I was asked to come in and be a mentor to help raise up advocates here in a program. I went through a training for peer support specialists. Besides having been houseless, I've also been put in a mental health institution as part of my history, and finding recovery from that. I don't like the word recovery. I think more it's about discovery and really getting to know who I was. Part of that problem was being a trans person and not having accessibility to good counseling in terms of discovering who I was and not having language in the world for that. So one of the things to help work this program here is creating a space for the young people to help organize themselves and be supported in what they want to do and reach their goals and how they want to support their community. Helping to give them tools for their own self-discovery, and also to help the young people here have governance among themselves, like how all the different choices they can have about how they will govern themselves, how they make decisions, how they set their goals, and getting support from the community through different education programs. And whatever high goal in there is the decolonization information. I'm going to be leading in meditation. I think it's really profoundly important to have a start about where we navigate from, like knowing who we are, and a practice of presencing, like how are we present with the moment when things are going on. Conflict resolution processes to help get through disagreements, and really having capacities to handle our own emotions and our passions so that we can work together. We have having to have different kinds of education going through the year. So working within the system, and also like if needed, I feel like it's real important to have that tool about direct action. That's an American history, starting with knowing that it is a right for human beings to protest laws that I feel are immoral or unjust. So that was like one of the tactics that's also part of that training. Myself concerned, like what's happening in December when a lot of people are going to be booted out of the Sullivan Arena. That's a concern that I'm addressing and being present around. There's been 2 people who died overnight in the houseless community. So it's just a constant, ongoing kind of presence that I know a lot of people who are coming into our program have those experiences in their community, and they've done a lot of their own organizing here already in their own natural ways. And so it's one of the things that helps support the people coming in to recognize the support and resilience they already have, and how to strengthen that in their community and have those stories be told. Really being present to how to make the shifts and where we need to go. That's pretty much covered. So if anybody has questions or anything.
Thanks, Terry.
And Besse is a policy person more than I am. Like I work more on the ground, and she's a policy person. I wish that she had come. Yep.
Well, thanks, Terry. I think we're glad that you could be on. Poor People's Campaign has been doing so much great advocacy around houseless issues and many other issues. So thank you. And we're going to come back to you with some questions for sure in a bit. I want to introduce Meg Zalatel as well. And I'm maybe, sorry, I'm not maybe pronouncing your last name so great. But Meg is also, in addition to being an Anchorage Assembly member, she's also an attorney and helps run the Anchorage Community House, and has been is a sponsor of the bill that is a proposal to buy 4 buildings for treatment services with CARES Act funds. And so thank you for being on this webinar with us, Meg. Please tell us more.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it. And you've pronounced my last name just fine, Zalatel. So I have moved to Alaska in 2005 to take a job doing disability rights legal work. I very much wanted to practice low-income legal work, and being able to do that from Anchorage gave me a wonderful opportunity to see the state and to really dig in on what was the manifestation of many social issues, many of which still persist today, and a wide variety of issues. We represented folks with disabilities, but in anything related to a disability, we often said we were like the ACLU for people with disabilities. And that really laid the groundwork for me to dig in on issues around mental health, the mental health system in Alaska, education, as well as community integration, which is a core tenet of progressive disability law, that our services should be made available as an integral part of our communities, so that we aren't excluding or discriminating against individuals. And then I left that particular office and opened my own small law firm, really concentrating instead of on crisis response, but being much more proactive. So doing a lot of estate planning, person-centered planning for families, particularly as young adults were hitting that transition age and gaining their independence. And I still do a lot of that work in my law firm. I do what we call low bono work. So my practice is not driven by the need for money. It is driven by the issues. I work with folks, I take payments, and it's all usually fixed rate. So you know exactly what you're gonna pay at the outset. I'm really concentrating on accessible legal services to the extent that they can be provided, which means it's a pretty slim operation. It's just me, and sometimes I get a little bit of help. And I do have a partner now as well, which is really great, because I got elected to the Anchorage Assembly about 1.5 years ago, and that definitely shifted my time. And in particular, I have been working with the Assembly really in my focus areas, which are disability related issues, community integration issues, and that's really manifest through being the co-chair and now the chair of the Committee on Homelessness, and really working through the systems issues that are involved around homelessness, which is extremely complex. It goes well beyond someone facing not having a home. It's often there's substance misuse issues, there's mental health issues. And so that work's really culminated this past summer in the legislation that was mentioned, which was the purchase of the 4 properties. That purchase was authorized in August, and now the municipality is going through its real estate transaction phase and due diligence phase. But it was a very contentious community conversation that really brought to light a lot of misconceptions around how individuals might find themselves in need of services at a shelter or at a treatment center. So I look forward to talking with you all about that and mental health. I'm extremely passionate about mental health, and very excited that we've also appropriated some money to look at bringing online mental health first responders in the municipality. So hopefully we'll get to dig into that a little bit today as well. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Meg. Yes, we're going to get into some juicy questions for sure. I want to introduce our last panelist, Marvin Roberts. He is currently the Health and Safety Coordinator for Tanana Chiefs Conference here in the interior. He has been doing a lot of work around drug and alcohol prevention. And he's from the village of Tanana and lives or was born there and has been living in Fairbanks. And he recently became a dad. Congratulations, Marvin.
4 years ago, but close enough.
Time flies.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, he is one of the 4, at the time, young men who was wrongfully convicted and spent 18 years in prison before being released. So really thankful that you could be on this panel with us today, Marvin, and tell us more about yourself and what the work that you've been doing.
That's very broad, so I'll try to gear it towards our discussion. First of all, you're scaring us with the juicy questions, so I think you should stop saying that, please. It's very scary. But so far, I've been out of prison for about 5 years now. It's been quick and been trying to do my best out here. Real quick, if those of you that doesn't know, the Fairbanks 4 of us in 1997 were wrongfully accused and convicted for crimes we did not commit. And we spent roughly 18, 19, 20 years fighting. And I believe there is a problem in the system, in the justice system, whatnot. I believe there is systematic racism. One of the reasons I believe the Fairbanks 4 were arrested. Right now, I can't speak on a lot of things because we are in an active case against the Fairbanks, the city of Fairbanks. It's public knowledge. We are on hold in the district court. The judge has issued something. My understanding is we have to wait for him to issue another ruling. But we are suing the city of Fairbanks for basically what happened to us. They threw us in prison, threw us in jail for crimes we did not commit, and they did us wrong, and we got out 4 or 5 years ago, 2015. Our names were, I guess you could say, cleared, and then we were sort of forced into signing a deal to get out of our nightmare, and it was I believe it was unconstitutional. And we have a really good team of attorneys, and we are suing the city of Fairbanks. Besides that, I am also on the Alaska Innocence Project. I'm a board member, and they, Bill Oberly, the director, he's a wonderful man. He's one of the reasons I am here today. The organization is a very wonderful organization, and they're still doing good work today, and I am happy to be a part of that movement to exonerate more innocent people. I don't know how much time I have. I have a checklist, but
You're doing great. If you can keep going.
okay. My main goal these days is for the lawsuit is to expose what happened to the Fairbanks Four and other misconduct in the 90s and the, I guess you could say, the 2000s. I don't know how to say that. I believe there was racism in the Fairbanks Police Department. I believe they didn't care about our rights. And I do not see any sort of reform for police in our state or any action to have police reform. I don't know of any. I know a lot of other states in the lower 48 are doing a lot for reform. Colorado, Iowa, New York, and Connecticut have already passed policing bills. So I would like to establish an independent agency to investigate police misconduct, give more authority to the Attorney General to prosecute police misconduct. And this is a big one. I want officers specifically trained in the academy to de-escalate situations and not have to use excessive police force or violence, and then have that training continual throughout their police career. And this is just some of the ideas I had, and I think I'm okay right now. I could probably talk all day.
I'm sure we could keep listening too. I think folks are, even though you can't see people's faces, very much interested in everything you've got to say, Marvin. And don't worry, the juicy questions are not hard.
All right.
We just want to hear more. But yeah, thank you for the work that you're doing. And I want to mention to all those present, I know that you all are working with many people, and there are other coalitions in the state working on various pieces of these legislative or policy demands or asks, and probably a number of folks on this call or on this Zoom that are really excited to get into some discussion around one of our first questions, which is, how do we keep our compass of justice in this time of great divide? We're in this moment in our country, in our state, where it feels like there's such a divide. It's like you either are with us or you're against us, or you're either for this or you're for that. And there's not a lot of where it feels like we see a lot of not working towards the middle or towards compromise or working things out. So I'm gonna ask each of you, how do you keep your compass for justice? When maybe we're asked to compromise on things that push us to some of our boundaries. How do we continue to make real effective policy steps that really do address the needs of our communities, when we're also having to walk this immense divide? I know is that a big one? Share with us all, because we all need a little bit of hope in this. And I'm gonna just leave this to whoever wants to jump in first.
Since I'm already on, what was the question again? I'm just kidding. I am willing to hear others, and I try not to be be hard-headed in situations and in life. I try to, I guess you could say, walk in another person's shoe and see how they're feeling on their issues, and try to relate and see if I could compromise or be sympathetic to their cause. And another thing, I work with others that share my passion, share the same passions with me in terms of justice. I think April Lynn is a wonderful friend of mine, and I always have great conversations with her about justice reform and just life in general. And I don't know how to say this. I've been fighting my whole life, I think, and I want to fight for what's right in for the people. And yeah, that's my answer. Probably confusing, but that's what I got.
No, thanks a lot, Marvin. Thank you.
Yeah, very similarly. I mean, I feel pretty well grounded in some basic principles that I believe in, which are really come out of my professional background, that go further back into how I was raised. But you know, they're core values, which are inclusivity, and that everyone should be a part of the community. And those are really my guidepost, I would say. And I'm learning, you know, this is my first foray into politics, that it takes a bit more of a nuanced touch. I've been known to be a bit of a blunt instrument. And so I have to step back and see where other individuals are coming from. These properties were extremely controversial, and I could really sympathize with some of my neighbors who live really close to one of the properties, and understand that no matter what the explanation was going to be, they were fearful because of the proximity to their homes. I have a highway project that's proposed to come across the street from my own home, and I know how I can't necessarily evaluate that project as objectively as I would like to, because it's so close and I'm so interested, you know, in a very personal way. And so I just recognize that, and I don't hold it against them. I totally see where they're coming from. And then I remember that the loudest voices in the room aren't all the voices. And I've learned to ask, actually, Miss Margot Bellamy, who's on the Anchorage School Board, she's really good at asking, who are we missing? Who's not here? Who's not a part of this conversation? And that's been really great for me to hit that pause button, say, who isn't here? Who am I not hearing from? How can I hear from them? And then how can I also convey the silent opinions? And they're not silent, but they're coming in non-public ways. So they're coming in through like my email, and making sure folks know that I'm hearing from folks who may not be visible because they're not at a meeting testifying, or they're not out protesting or something like that, to really explain the entirety of the information I've received prior to making a decision, but also knowing that my decision is responsive to the community, but driven by my own guideposts, and being really transparent about what those are, and that I have some core values that I'm not going to deviate from.
Thank you so much, Meg. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Terry. And my big thoughts I have about this is that we're in the middle of needing to do a paradigm shift. And we're talking policy, and we're talking about a machine that we exist in called justice. And it's in very, very deep need of change. And I go and cite Friedhof Capra, who put up this book called The Ecology of Law. And it's we have to go and look at a change here. We're human beings inside of a machine system, and none of us are machines, but we talk all from our heads. We don't bring our bodies into the room when we're making decisions. We don't really usually bring our feelings into the room when we make decisions. And it's like all this idea about power and force and ownership and all these different kind of qualities that create a sense of like, if I don't make it in this system, then I'm going to be thrown away. And then there's all this discrimination that goes on top of that based on like having a historical racist system, historical people, European coming over here and taking over, and like just because it's written down and that's law, when there's actually a thing called natural law going on that we don't have a system in alignment with that natural law. We don't think in ecosystems, that nature doesn't have a voice. And like, who's not in the room? I think about that a lot. Who didn't make it? Why didn't they make it? Those are really big, important voices too. And like, where are they? And so like part of my process here is like, how do we go and get our bodies into the rooms? How do we get that wisdom that comes from our bodies in this decision-making processing? And I want to uplift this thing called Indigenous sovereign law. It's very different from European law. And then like when I went and started to look at that, and I was like, wow, this is a lot like the healing systems that I know that works with mental health. Process work, which is developed by a Jungian psychologist and a quantum physicist. You put this all together, and he's gotten results down there in Portland. And the other one is open dialogue in Finland. It's a process. We're not doing process. We're all having this decision-making and agendas before we go in, that we already know what we need to do because we have an agenda. And that's what we're trying to figure out as policy, but like, where are all the people talking together? Where are all the people who have to be part of this? And we call them stakeholders, but we don't even know how to bring all the stakeholders in the room. So it's just like, if you want to uplift this process called presencing, and everybody can look it online, it's free. You can look at it for 90 minutes and like get the whole program figured out. But that's a structure thing, a structural change about how we have these conversations. We're in the middle about, we need to have a paradigm shift. That's why houselessness is so complex. It's like, it's a result of the system we're in. But we're having a hard time looking at the system itself. And we can also uplifting the whole process around decolonization. I'm done, that was too much, sorry.
No, thank you, Terry. I mean, I think you really were summed well also some of what our other panelists are saying as well, just like, how do we navigate kind of bringing our lived experience into policy development, right? How do we change systems of governance? And sorry, I've got a kid digging in the refrigerator next to me. That's distracting me. Working from home. So how do we bring our humanity and our lived experience into real systemic change? Understanding that these systems of governance were really not necessarily created for many of us, whether that's us as in LGBTQ, us as in women, or us as in people of color, indigenous folks, right? And so, yeah, so the work of building systemic change through policy is so difficult in this current. I wonder how do you move past when one avenue of work might fail, or when you're in the face of something failing? What do we do then when things don't go as planned? Share with some of the people listening in, like I said, might be policymakers. They are probably community shapers. How do you, our panelists, face failure or setbacks or a different direction to keep going?
Well, I think you've really encapsulated what often happens is you have to shift into a different direction. I try to keep in mind, being on the assembly, I'm one of 11 votes. And so you have to be strategic. I recently brought a use of force ordinance around Anchorage Police Department, and it wasn't going to pass, frankly, right now. And it was frustrating, definitely. Again, as I said, I've been known to be a bit more of a blunt instrument. Part of me wanted to just force it because it's such an important issue and it's such a timely issue. And I really felt that urgency, but stepping back and seeing that there's another path forward towards similar goals, which were accountability and transparency, that could lay the groundwork for actually much larger change or much more meaningful change in the long term, was good. And that was by talking through my frustrations, with folks I was working with and those with more experience, and reaching out to mentors. I think having mentors and work that is very public and can be very controversial is invaluable, and getting their perspective, because they've probably been there just maybe on a different issue, and they can really advise a different path forward, or maybe the advice is stay the course because the controversy needs to happen. And even if it's a loss, the loss starts the community conversation, which was a big piece of why I'd originally brought the ordinance, even though everyone wasn't ready for it. And so I think knowing what you ultimately want to achieve, and can you still achieve it in some form or fashion, even if it's going to look very different, and then having to explain why you shifted strategy, because some people are let down and some people are disappointed when you then back off in the face of opposition. It's not always because of the opposition, it's just that it wouldn't do what you wanted it to do, or that you could achieve it in a different way. I actually find that the hardest part, frankly, is I feel like I'm letting people down who really got behind something, but that it would be a more devastating blow if it didn't pass or it didn't make it through, because then it would be harder to bring it back. But they've invested so much in it, and to make sure that I'm acknowledging their investment, and that I'm talking through the process with them, and how we can continue to be engaged in the issue, even if it's not that particular item that's going to make the change we were hoping for.
Well, thanks, Meg. Let's hear a lot of just, navigating the system and what works, what's going to make the most change in this system, and sounds really, nuanced and complicated. Thank you for sharing a bit of that. Marvin, did you want to share anything on this question?
Gotta adjust my little headset here. Yeah, how do we face failure? I think that was the question. Well, I'm stubborn. My mom raised a stubborn boy. So used to be I'd just keep on, attacking a problem, with the same old gusto. But, nowadays I take a step back and go along with what Meg said. I like reevaluate my situation, and if I could do some work in another area to help, then I'll do that. But I'm stubborn, and I like to keep at things. In my case, still fighting for what's right, for justice. And when I do face failure, like in the court system, I would usually turn to my family members for support and guidance. My baby nowadays, she's my biggest support system, do everything for her. But yeah, that's in a nutshell how I face failure or adversity. And I also try to get advice from my mentors and friends on situations.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah, I guess for me, facing failure, I feel like for the most important thing is to hang on to the relationships, and the relationships come first in many, many ways. And I really, really like looking at like, well, what worked, what didn't work, what did we learn? Who did we meet? Who did we learn about? And, well, who was our engagements with? How did we start to build more relationships in that process? Did we make more relationships? And I have this whole idea of success is like, I'm still here and we have another day. So like success is always here. If I'm here and our people here, that we have another day, that's like my level of idea of success. Because like I have some long-term goals, but they might not happen in my lifetime, though. Yeah, so like I just have a really long view about a lot of things. Like, how do I build relationships? Because that's really my big goal as I go and make policy targets or goals. Of course, we want to win. I feel like, it's reading the Asada chant, it's our duty to win. And I really follow that a lot as well. But it's a long-term project. Like, how do we have something about winning when I want to take care of my enemies at the same time, because we're on the same planet together and we're going to be on the same planet together? Are we going to learn to make peace? Are we going to learn how to think together? Those are big goals for me.
Thanks, Terry. Love that. Being regardless of the outcome, the relationships, right? Of being in right relationship and learning the lessons of any venture forward, right? So important. Let's see, we still have a good amount of time, and I wanted to ask, why policy? And maybe this should have been at the beginning, but maybe it's also, the question is, what policy priority do you have in front of you as a priority? And you've kind of said this already in your intros, but if you want to give us a little more detail about the policies that are a priority for you right now, and why in particular we need these policies, and maybe why the tactic of policy as opposed to the tactic of some other tactic or strategy is really important. There's a lot in that question. What is your policy priority right now? And help all of our listeners really get behind maybe what that policy priority is, and just how important it is to have that particular policy or something addressed in a policy format on that issue.
I can give it a try here. So for me right now, the most important policy that I've been working on and that is moving forward in Anchorage, and I think we're seeing it across the country, is more tailored first response in emergencies around mental health and wellness. So instead of having police continue to respond to wellness checks, bringing on mental health first responders. The state of Alaska has been looking at this for about a year and a half through something called the Crisis Now model, which comes out of Maricopa County in Arizona. But Eugene, Oregon has a really good model called CAHOOTS, CAHOOTS, and there are others. Denver just brought one online as well. I think it's the new face of more responsive emergency response. For Anchorage, it feels like a very natural fit because we also have the Anchorage Safety Patrol, which is another different version of a first response that's not police or fire. And it's really important to me because for years, I sued and litigated against a failing mental health system that really those issues originated out of a lack of comprehensive mental health care and response. And we tried to change systems through litigation, and sometimes that's possible, but it's not a complete system change because often it's solving the very particularized facts of the litigation. Whereas on the policy level, we really get to dig in and say, how will this address the entire community's needs, both from the response, where does it fit within the existing system, how do we sustainably fund it, how do we make sure it remains responsive over time if we learn that the calls are of a certain type, and what can we anticipate that it will identify in terms of the continuum of care where we have gaps. And for Anchorage going in, we know we have 2 primary gaps. We don't have a dispatch that has trained clinicians on the front end, and we know we don't have crisis recovery centers set up. So someplace for an individual to go that's in acute crisis that can't be stabilized with a mental health first responder. To some extent, that's kind of stymied the system a little bit in moving forward. So it's nice that Anchorage taking this policy position in light of the request for police reforms and more tailored policing and defunding the police and reinvestment, that we can go with this second step, this mental health first responder piece, knowing we need to look at those other pieces, but that it shouldn't stop us from moving forward with something that's really timely and needed, and has been exacerbated by COVID, quite frankly. Mental health providers are doing a lot of telehealth. Their capacity is limited, their staff is working from home, and we have more stressors in our environment. So this investment in mental health is not only COVID responsive, it's policy responsive around policing, and it's just so long overdue that I think personally, I think it's a game changer, like a major game changer. If this happens, you'll see me just walking around with a ridiculous grin on my face, probably for the next decade. It doesn't mean that the work is done, but it's been needed for so long. And I don't know that I could have been a part of the conversation from the reactive side the same way I can from the proactive side, which is something policy can really do, which is pretty cool, and not something I would have contemplated way back when I was a baby lawyer and had first come up here. So it really feels like, for me, kind of coming full circle in some of the work I've been doing.
Wow, thanks, Meg. That, I think I'll speak for everybody on the call. Maybe I just get excited about hearing about that policy piece and what you are proposing in Anchorage. I know that that's something in my work also, we're trying to figure out how we implement and work up here in Fairbanks and work with coalitions. So we'll definitely be watching that and learning as well. And I wonder, think about this. I'm going to have each of the panelists answer this question, but also think about, Meg, how folks can engage, how others can help, and that will be the next round of questions. So I don't know if Terry or Marvin want to talk about your priority policy efforts right now.
Well, I'm just saying there's like several different kind of policies that are going on, and Besse could really talk a lot more elegantly about the policy goals for the Alaska Poor People's Campaign. I want to talk about the advocates and residents here, that a lot of the policies we have here are like really centered around how are we being in a trauma-informed communications and governance process. and also like this healing centered ideas about how are each of the people who are in this organization taking care of themselves and coming from a place of our working on our own selves as we're also working in communication with each other. So we're coming at as whole beings when we're doing this work. And those are like policy ideas about how we just create decisions together, and also about how we create what we want as our goals. So making it as rich as possible in terms of bringing our whole selves in, or what are our dreams, and then what are our challenges and limitations we have to work with. And so this shift to that, and I know that's one of the national policies of the Poor People's Campaign in general, is talking about a moral regeneration needed in our country. That's a really strong principle of presenting out there, is like this need for moral regeneration for our country. And I know Besse would do this whole portion a lot more eloquently than I do, but I just want to bring that up, one part about our conflict process and how we deal with our decision making.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, really important pieces there of our moral regeneration.
My turn?
Go ahead, Marvin. Yes.
All right. Policy priority right now. All I know is I want change in the system. I want the law enforcement to stop locking up innocent people. I want to end systematic racism up here in Alaska, everywhere actually. This is a big one. I want to stop police shootings. And yeah, that's what I got written down.
Thanks, Marvin. Yeah, I think I think we're seeing a lot of these priorities be shaped into numerous various policies, and from the very local level to the state to the national level. And I think it's really helpful to be able to dive into and see what other people are doing, so that we can maybe model or shape some of that in our locale. So I wanted to also just check in and see if we have any questions come in, but I wanted to ask if there is a place that you see for folks on this call who are probably interested in supporting your work or the priority that you're talking about. Do you have ideas for where folks can be getting more involved, either, like I said, in your work or in your priority areas? How can folks support? Whoever wants to, who's ever ready.
I have a real quick one for me. It's pretty simple. If you get called for jury duty, go to jury duty, and somebody, you may save somebody's life. I mean, that's what I have at the top of my mind. I got others, but I'll hold it. Support the Innocence Project. Yes, the Alaska Innocence Project. They are on Facebook. They're online. They need a lot of help. We need board members. Yes, board members, please. This is a big panel. I mean, not a big panel, but there's a lot of people listening. So that's what I have to say.
All right, we'll drop into the chat. Somebody monitoring can drop into the chat the Alaska Innocence Project website. Great. Thanks, Marvin.
I love the advice about jury duty. I get excited when I get called for jury duty. So a lot of folks kind of dread it, but no, I think that's amazing. It's an integral part of our justice system. At the kind of local level, I would recommend figuring out what's the best way to stay engaged with what your local government's doing. It's often a diversity, there's a huge amount of issues, many of which folks don't get terribly interested in, like when we authorize filling a pothole. But when these social issues come up, it's incumbent upon us to amplify that they're coming up and that there are these changes coming, and then informing the public where they can stay involved, what committee might be hearing, the details, what kind of meetings we're having. It's been a little bit, I guess, good and bad in the time of COVID. We don't use the most accessible format in Anchorage, unfortunately. We don't use Zoom, we use Microsoft Teams, so that's a little bit frustrating. But we know that, like, our clerk's office, who helps the assembly, Facebook Lives most of our events on their Facebook page. So I'm always pointing folks to the clerk's page because they are a really great conduit. And then I would, remind folks there's so many issues, to make sure you also take care of yourself. I think that's so important. It feels like there are constantly fires we need to be putting out or injustices we need to address, and that's true. But if you don't take care of yourself on some level, you won't be there to do the work. Burnout is real, and it can keep you from pursuing what you're really passionate about. I've come really close once or twice, and now I try to keep that in mind, because the things I'm passionate about, I'm still going to be passionate about, so I need to make sure that I'm there to show up, and show up in a really conscientious way. So I would say to make sure you take care of yourself so that you can be engaged and have your support network.
Thank you so much. Yeah, important things to remember there with all the various priorities and issues. Terry.
Yeah, one of the ways you can stay connected is to go to our Facebook page. We have camp here, and we have the Advocates in Residence, and we have the Alaska Poor People's Campaign. So it's checking in on the Facebook. You can see what's going on, and sometimes you have calls go out. This Saturday, we're having a parade to the polls in Mountain View. And the evening before, from 5 to 7 at the First Congregation, we're decorating the cars because this will be a car parade. So there's that's the event that's coming up real shortly here. And educate yourself and keep yourself going. And I second that whole thing about taking care of yourself. Be connecting with your friends. And there's a whole much personal work to do, especially about undoing racism. It's ongoing for me. And really giving yourself, connecting to yourself is really important stuff. I don't think our society really gives us enough room to really know who we are. We're constantly being told who we should be. We're constantly told, oh, you can be this or that, but not too many kids get asked, who are you? And then let the kids just be themselves. We don't live in that kind of society. So check out those things, and everybody be well.
Thanks, Terry. I think you bring up a really great point of being our full selves there here in our work, and something that I think maybe wasn't as explicit in this conversation, but I want to get explicit. I kind of make a lot of assumptions maybe in thinking about anti-discrimination policy, and I just assume we're all understanding this term of anti-discrimination. But I want to bring us back to something that maybe just to maybe close out. We've got a few more minutes, but why is it important to call the policies that we're talking about, the various priorities that we're talking about today, anti-discrimination as opposed to, say, public safety? So I want to maybe close out with this question of, the importance of that terminology.
Sure. So I think it's really important to use that terminology because it recognizes the inherent systemic discrimination that probably built the situation in which the policy is addressing. I think that it's really important to recognize that no matter what the social issue is in front of a political body, it's probably been built through systemic discrimination of a class of people, whether intentional or not. And I think that really came out when we talked about the 4 properties purchases in Anchorage. We've been getting a lot of blowback. A lot of the members said that the testimony, and I agree, and said so as well, that had a racist undertone to it, a lot of othering language, they and them. And I feel like when individuals are taking offense at being called out about that, even if not individually identified, or the fact that there weren't specific pejorative terms used, is that they're not recognizing that the problem we're trying to address is built on a pattern of discrimination and racism. And so to continue to perpetuate the current system is a continued perpetuation of discrimination and racism. So I think that's becoming much more at the fore and being much more expressly verbalized. And I hope we continue to do that. And it's, I dare say, it's a learning curve because we look at things sometimes so discreetly that now it's like, well, no, let's step back and look at things much more holistically, even if it seems like it's something rather benign, and say, wait, what are the implications here? Why are we here? And doing a bit more of a deeper dive. And for me, that's really been eye-opening, and it helps me very quickly, again, identify whose voice isn't in the room that I probably need to hear from, or is the proposed solution going to be something that isn't better? It's going to simply continue the perpetuation in the name of trying to fix the problem. So I think that's why it's really important, because if you say that all of these policies are anti-discrimination, then you're recognizing the inherent discrimination.
Thank you so much, Meg. That was great. I don't know if Marvin or Terry want to jump in on this, or if you've got anything you want to add.
I think Meg said it best. It sucks being discriminated against, you know, and we're just trying to change that, and we want change. We want life to be better for all people.
Yeah, well, and I think we can see it so clearly, you know, in the case, in your case, and in other cases around just the real disproportionate impact that the justice system or the policing, or even and houselessness is impacting particular, you know, communities more than others, in particular Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ communities. Terry, I saw you go off mute. I'm gonna stop talking so you can talk.
Yeah, I would just say that it's really important to have something that jars people awake, and language is one of those tools. Really recognizing that, oh, people are not just failing because there's something wrong with them. There's actually system-wide situation going on. But yeah, that's one of the big uses for languaging, is to help jar people awake. Recognition, like.
Thanks, Terry. So I'm just gonna kind of do a bit of, well, I'm gonna summarize in a little bit, but I wanna give you all each a chance to just say some closing thoughts and also, Will, hold on. Any participants who are listening in on this webinar, if you have questions, this is your last chance to type them in the chat or maybe come off mute and say it, because I'm going to give each of the panelists some time to just either answer that question or do some closing remarks. But so far, what we've heard, for those of you who maybe have missed some parts of it, we have heard a lot about the reasoning for using policy, and particularly what we're talking about here of anti-discrimination policy that is actively calling out the problem, right, which is discrimination within our system. Our systems of governments, our policy systems, and actively working to counter that, right? To create anti-discrimination policies. And these discriminatory policies often target people of color, LGBTQ people, and low income folks. So we heard from our panelists about the need to have mentors and to really keep checking in with our principles and our guideposts. Ooh. And we heard, about making sure to check in, like, who's in the room, who's contributing to the conversations, to the tables of policy development. Being very conscious of that. We heard about some organizations to support. We have another question. Okay, another question came in. How can we best support the direction the speakers wish to see us as the community perform? Okay, so they kind of answered that a little earlier, but we can ask them that again in their closing remarks. How can they best support the direction that you all are wanting to see happen in our community? We heard about the mental health, or first response mental health policy work that Meg is doing in the Anchorage area, or is working towards in the Anchorage area. And I'm seeing some questions, so give me a second to read them. So if there are then any closing remarks or any personal stories of hope that you can close us out with, each of you, as we all endeavor forward with our work to build anti-discrimination and systemic change. We'd love to hear some personal stories of hope. Marvin.
Okay. Personal story of hope. Let me see. 5 years ago, I got out of prison with no money, no education as people see it, a college degree, but through hard work and family support and belief in a higher power, and today I own a house, I have a truck and a car, and I have a wonderful baby. And this is within 5 years. It's you can doesn't matter where you are at in life, you if you keep hope, things will turn out right. And the message for all of you out there is keep fighting for what's right. Join groups that support good causes, you know. Go to the marches in the street, you know. Go to the places people are meeting at, you know. Maybe not now because COVID-19, but you know what I'm saying. Keep fighting for what's right. It's don't sit around, you know, do something. And that's what I got to say. Thank you, Ine, for having this, and thank you everybody for joining us and hearing me answer these juicy questions. Yeah.
Marvin, thank you so much. I mean, I think that I remember when you got out, and one of the first opportunities that we got to talk, and I remember being in awe of your ability to be so proactive after so many years of imprisonment, wrongful imprisonment. And I think the inspiration that you give so many of us is really so important. And I know that we all want to see justice. And I know you can't talk about some of these things, but for folks, you know, on watching, I think, you know, there's the Fairbanks 4 were released but not exonerated, and I think that that's an injustice, and really a lot of still need for justice. So I hope folks can support in the Innocence Project, the Alaska Innocence Project, and really thank you, Marvin, for the inspiration that you give us all, the work you're doing. I mean, if there's any story of hope, personal hope, I mean, really, that is your story, Marvin.
Thank you, Ine.
So I'm sorry to ask the other panelists to have to follow that, but I'm going to ask you to share some.
Well, I'll follow that. Personal story of hope. I would just say, like, I had this whole experience of raising my nephew from age 9. And me, I've already been a mental health patient and like survived that and gone through the whole system thing. But my nephew came up from the system down in Colorado. He was in foster care. Then they had to put him in a home. He was only 9 years old. Then he came to live with me and my partner, and it was really a big teaching for me of taking care of the next generation and how much pain and suffering that he brought to our door around his experience of violence, and trying to learn how to express what was going on inside of him that nobody gave him any space whatsoever to do. He's, you know, out there working a job now, and nobody expected that from him. And to, you know, together, like me understanding that recovery is super possible, you know, and people can go and meet lives. And on a personal level, I think each human being has a destiny, and that's not something really covered in our society, but I believe that. And people are coming in from a holy place into this world as a child, and then what happens, you know, it's like, and it's not that adults are bad people, but you just learned what we learned. So I has like a profound story about recovery. And like when I was going through that process with my family, it just brought up so much healing for my whole family. And I grew up more. And so that's like a whole big story of hope, that I know that a lot of recovery is totally possible. And I also want to add on to closing thoughts. I really thank you. Marvin, it's the first time hearing you talk. And I'd really like to ask if you could come and talk to the people who are here when they get here. And thank you, Meg, for hanging in there. I think going and trying to put personal stuff into the whole law machine, I don't know how to do that. And I really want a whole system different of law than we have, but good for you doing that. So thank you and you, Anya, for bringing in all these people together to talk about anti-discrimination.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you for sharing that story and for the work that Poor People's Campaign is doing and that you're doing there as well for folks in need. People should check out Poor People's Campaign. We should get that link also in the chat and support that work. Meg, do you have a story you want to share in closing?
Sure. So I have tomorrow she'll be 9-year-old daughter, and she has really demonstrated to me the value and just the value of young people participating in this work. She recently spoke at a Black Lives Matter rally or the March on Alaska rally, and she blew me away. I was very impressed with her insightfulness and the other youth speakers. And I think that as adults, we sometimes discount that. And I find it very hopeful that they're tuned in, they're paying attention, and they have. I mean, to hear anything from a child sometimes just really gets you to the heart of the matter. And so that's been really hard and hopeful for me in the work, particularly around police reform and discrimination in policing in Anchorage even, and to listen to the youth and their perceptions and their perspective about things, because I think we get in our very adult world and we forget about all of these young minds that are swirling around us and are a part of our lives, but that they're observing and they have really, really profound thoughts on things. And I think in an instant they bring me back to like kind of the very core of things. So I find that hopeful. And thank you all for having me, for organizing this. Thank you, Terry and Marvin. I've learned a lot today, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to participate. Thanks.
Thank you, Meg. I've learned a lot from you all as well. I know that there are many other issues that we could be also talking about in terms of policy development, and I just want to uplift some of those, very big issues in the state, whether it's missing and murdered Indigenous women or education reform or climate change policies. I think all of that, all of those focus areas have a slant on discrimination and can be also worded into anti-discrimination policy. And for those of you, like Meg said, I think feeling that youthful energy and that hope, I would suggest folks check out First Alaskans Institute's Elders and Youth annual conference that's coming up. They always put out some really great youth and elder resolutions that would be really wonderful for people to see. What are the youth, what are Indigenous youth and elders putting out in terms of resolutions that could be shaped into policies, that need to be shaped into policies. So check that out. And thank you all again for, we can put elders and youth in the, it's First Alaskans Institute's Elders and Youth annual conference. I think, have a list of past resolutions that have come out. So those are some really great places to get inspiration and to help to hopefully shape out some policy, anti-discrimination policies. Again, we are at our time. I thank each of our panelists endlessly, and I thank our coalition that has put this webinar series together. Check out Catalyzing Change webinar series for the next episode, or I've been watching too much, I don't know, episodes. It is the next episode. Thank you all. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Meg.
Thank you.